Time now for the final spin. The topic: fitness personality Jillian Michaels goes all birth of a nation on CNN. The spin: white people weren't nearly as deeply involved in slavery as historians have led us to believe. Unfortunately, in the year of our Lord 2025, we still have people providing defenses and excuses for slavery. Something I thought we agreed was indefensible.
He's not whitewashing slavery. So
he's not?
He's not. No,
okay.
He's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk about the fact that when you look at
slavery,
let's talk about the fact.
Slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
But it was a system of white supremacy.
You realize that slavery is thousands of years old?
The truth. I have to say, my favorite pro-slavery argument provided by people like Jillian Michaels is, hey, everybody was doing it. Slavery was all the rage. What were we supposed to do? I mean, slavery was practically the skinny jeans of our time. As much as I would love to take a sledgehammer to everything Jillian Michaels said, it is far more effective for me to simply present the only response that matters from award-winning journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, author of the 1619 Project. Enjoy.
Let's take the fewer than 2% of white people owned slaves at face value, though we know that number is technically incorrect. And let's apply that standard to any other industry. What percentage of Americans own social media companies or technology companies such as Apple? It's a tiny percentage. I'm doubtful if it's even 1% of Americans. And yet no one would credibly argue that social media companies are not ubiquitous across American life, that they don't play a major influence on our political, social, and economic life in America. And in fact, what we know is that more than 70% of Americans use social media, though hardly any Americans own social media platform. There's a reason that the heads of Meta, Apple, and Amazon, Google, and X all took part in Trump's inauguration festivities, with several of them standing on the actual dais during Trump's inauguration. These men also happen to be amongst the wealthiest in the world and demonstrate how a small cadre of super wealthy men can have an outsized impact on American politics and culture. This is just critical thinking, y'all. So if we want to play the numbers game, the much more important measure is what percentage of Americans own slaves? No, but what percentage of those empowered did? So here we go. Before 1865, the end of slavery in the United States, 63% of U.S. presidents had been slave owners at some point in their lives. More than 1,800 members of Congress owned slaves, meaning between 1789 and 1819, more than half of the men elected to Congress each session were slave owners. What about the Supreme Court? 26 of this nation's first 30 Supreme Court justices were enslavers. And about half of all the Supreme Court justices before the Civil War were enslavers. So many Supreme Court justices were enslavers that if we added up all the Supreme Court justices coming all the way to this present court, 1 out of 4 of all Supreme Court justices in this nation's history were enslavers. I mean, let's just look at our money. All but one of the people on our cash currency engaged in African slavery. Look at the $1 bill, $2 bill, 10, 20, 50, 100. All these men engaged in slavery. It's weird that we didn't value all those non-slave holding white people enough to put them on our money. The majority of the most powerful men in this country, the men who made the federal laws, interpreted the laws, and enforced the laws, built their wealth on African slavery. And I assure you, that number says much more about the country we inhabit than that 2%. But let's not stop there, because even limiting the boundaries of the conversation to those who owned other human beings is highly misleading. Much like technology today, slavery in the United States was a national endeavor that undergirded not just our political system, but our entire economy. During the height of slavery, it was not the Northeast, Boston or New York, but the Mississippi River Valley in the Deep South that had more millionaires per capita than anywhere in the nation. And the Confederacy, had it succeeded at being a separate country, would have been the 4th richest nation in the world when the Civil War started.